قل هذه سبيلي أدعو إلى الله على بصيرة أنا ومن اتبعني وسبحان الله وما أنا من المشركين.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. أما بعد. We're still going through the examples of ibadah that the author rahimahullah mentioned. After dua, we took fear. And then the third example that he mentions is Al-Rajaa. Then later on, after he mentions and he repeats Al-Rajaa with proof, as we said he's going to do in the book, the proof that he chooses is وَدَلِيلُ الرَّجَاءِ قَوْلُهُ تَعَالَى فَمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو لِقَاءَ رَبِّهِ فَلْيَعْمَلْ عَمَلًا صَالِحًا وَلَا يُشْرِكْ بِعِبَادَةِ رَبِّهِ أَحَدًا. Whoever hopes to see his Lord and be rewarded by him, let him make his worship correct and pure and sincere for the sake of Allah. And let him not make any share for anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what's Rajaa? Rajaa is hope. It's hope and longing which a person wishes. And it could be something that's usually close. That's what it usually is. But it could be something that's far off, but treated as though it's close. This earnest hope of Rajaa, Al-Rajaa, includes humility and submission. This type that includes humility and submission may not be directed to anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he mentioned Rajaa after fear. He said dua, Rajaa, a fear and Rajaa. Because Rajaa and Khawf are like two wings of a bird. And that shows the fiqh of the author in mentioning them right after each other. Rajaa and Khawf to a Muslim spiritually are like the two wings of a bird. You fly with them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spiritually to reach the highest of all places. Last year I gave a seminar from around pre-dawn to nearly midnight with some slight breaks just on those two ibadat. The ibadah of fear and hope. And I'm not sure if the recording is available, but if it is, I refer you to that because we went into some details. And this shows you that what we study here is at somewhat of a summary. Not a basic summary, but at a summary. Because we said the book has to the explanation has to coincide with the style of the book. Now there's two types of Rajaa. Some Rajaa is ibadah and some is عادة. Rajaa طبيعي, عادة طبيعي, natural Rajaa. That's when one has hope in someone, in what that person is able to do. That's natural hope. To have hope your wife has dinner ready. It's under her control and it's under her power that Allah has given her. That's normal, natural hope, and that's not the type of worship that, if given to, that constitutes shirk. The second type of ibadah, of Rajaa, is hope and longing with lowliness, humility, and submission, and in matters only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do. Hope and longing with lowliness, humility, and submission, and in matters only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do. If this type goes to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it's major shirk. To have, for example, hope in humans giving you victory in matters that only Allah can do, major shirk. To have hope in someone alive, or in someone dead, or in an inanimate object, or those not present, without any materialistic means or something not at their reach or under their power given to them, to have hope in that, that's major shirk. Basically, in a one-liner, it's hoping from them matters only Allah can do. That is shirk akbar. In the case of having hope in the dead, it's just like we mentioned earlier about dua and fear. Having hope, raja, in a dead, in matters that they could have done while they were alive, now that they are dead, it becomes major shirk. That's the two kinds of hope that there is. Two types of raja. One is normal, natural, and the other one is the ibadah type, which if given to other than Allah becomes shirk. Then there's a praised form of raja and dispraised form of raja. The praised form of raja, raja mahmud, that's for both sinners and those who are righteous. How so? For the righteous, seeking and having hope in the ajr or reward of Allah while doing His ordained commands, that's praised. Meaning, you're having hope in Allah, you have hope in Allah, raja in Allah, and you're actually working for it. That's praised raja. It's the raja of an individual doing the obedience of Allah and the brightness and guidance from Allah, hoping for the reward of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the good raja. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us among these people. Again, it's the raja of an individual striving to be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the brightness and guidance from Allah, hoping for the reward of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hope is a heart action, but it also entails a physical follow-up. If the heart action has hope in it, there's a physical effect to it. Raja is a heart belief, yes, but its effect must show on the limbs. This is the true correct form of raja, the proper form of raja, the praised form of raja. However, we also said there's a praised form of raja for sinners. That's for the righteous. But there's also a praised form of raja for sinners. Can a sinner have raja and hope in Allah? Most definitely. A sinner who made a sin, repented, then had hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah will forgive him, that's a praised form of raja. That's good hope. The praised form of raja is the raja of one who sins, who has committed a sin, then repented to Allah, hoping for the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're all that sinner. We're all in deep need of repentance all the time. And we all need to have hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He will forgive us. Our hope is not only that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive us when we repent, the action of repenting, but that He will even change them into deeds. وَهُوَ الَّذِي يَقْبَلُ التَّوْبَةَ عَنْ عِبَادِهِ وَيَعْفُ عَنِ السَّيِّئَاتِ. In another verse, فَأُولَٰئِكَ يُبَدِّلُ اللَّهُ سَيِّئَاتِهِمْ حَسَنَاتٍ. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah said a beautiful statement that pertains to hope here. He said, it may be that a sin causes one to go to Jannah. And it may be a deed that causes one to go to Jahannam wal-'iyadhu billah. What did he mean by that? Because some people misinterpret his quote. Deeds at times could give one excessive hope. Sometimes, if you don't restrain and control yourself. They may make someone arrogant. It happens with those who may appear to be even righteous sometimes. Sometimes arrogance seeps into some, and they get to the point of feeling that they're doing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a favor. He forgot Allah granted him the blessing of guidance, let alone the details of performing the ibadat and the obedience. He thinks now he's given Allah favors. That your deeds, your iman, your Islam, that's a blessing from Allah. Just like the blessing of food and water. In fact, more important than that. يَمُنُّونَ عَلَيْكَ أَنْ أَسْلَمُوا قُلْ لَا تَمُنُّوا عَلَيَّ إِسْلَامَكُمْ بَلِ اللَّهُ يَمُنُّ عَلَيْكُمْ أَنْ هَدَاكُمْ لِلْإِيمَانِ إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. They regard as a favor over you, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. They regard as a favor over you that they have embraced Islam. Allah told the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, tell him, don't count your Islam as a favor over me. بَلِ اللَّهُ يَمُنُّ عَلَيْكُمْ بَلِ اللَّهُ يَمُنُّ عَلَيْكُمْ أَنْ هَدَاكُمْ لِلْإِيمَانِ إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. Allah conferred the favor over you as He has guided you to the faith if you are indeed truthful. If you're in kuntum sadiqeen. A properly raised person on tawheed, on this hope, no matter the quantity and quality of deeds he performs, he does not let his hope go to an extreme of ghulu, an extreme excessiveness, to the point that he feels that he's doing Allah favors. He always feels he's having shortcomings. Not only does he feel his shortcomings, but on top of that, he thanks Allah for letting him do what he is able to do of the deeds. You read Quran, you spoke a word of truth at a time when people are silent, you did your qiyam, you're a mujahid maybe. You're in the path of Allah. You're imprisoned for the sake of Allah. You're harmed for the cause of Allah. All that, and you say, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, that Allah honored me with that. Allah has all the favors over me and you for choosing us and allowing us to do that. Look how privileged you are at simple ibadat. Look how Allah blessed you with that and honored you with that. Just to show you that you need to be thankful to Allah that He even let you, that He chose you to do those ibadat. Tonight, they're changing the daylight savings time, the summer time. In Maghrib now will be around, I think 6:35. Those who took advantage of fasting in the past months broke their Maghrib before the masses broke their dinner. At one point, Maghrib was about 4:50. Before people returned home for dinner. The days were so cold and so short, you didn't even need a sip of water during the daytime. You fasted. Many of you fasted for the sake of Allah, inshallah. And at the same time, others fasted. But they didn't do it for the sake of Allah. They did it because it just wasn't time for dinner. You got ajr, they didn't. Very, very, very few took advantage of making an ibadah, while the overwhelming majority didn't. It's a favor of Allah over you. So you say, Alhamdulillah, that you were among those who were blessed to do and perform that ibadah. Allah honored you with it. You never feel you're the one offering Allah favors ever. Feel that you need to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala day and night that He honored you to complete that ibadah. Take for example, like fasting, dhikr, reading Quran, memorizing Quran. It's easy. Allah said it's easy. وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. We made the Quran, the dhikr, easy. It's easy. Reading it is easy. Dhikr is easy. Memorizing it easy. I was invited 2 days ago to a competition, Quran competition for a relative. 4 years old. Allahumma barik lahu. Into his family. He read Surah Yasin. The whole group of children read Surah Yasin. He got first place for reading Surah Yasin. The whole group, all of them, read Surah Yasin, and that 4-year-old memorizes, is about to finish Juz' Amma. Not only him, but all his class memorized Surah Yasin. 4-year-old, born in this country. And you tell me elders can't do that? But the key is Allah chooses some. Is there anyone who can't drive to work, or in his leisure time, or while in an office waiting for someone, or, we have a lot of spare time? Is there anyone who can't say Alhamdulillah, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar? Everyone can. But Allah chooses some. So don't think you're doing favors to Allah. Do them sincerely and thank Him that He allowed you to do them. Memorization of the Quran, jihad, or anything in between that, you say Alhamdulillah that Allah bestowed upon me His blessings and favors to do it. He has all the favors over me. That's what Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah meant when he said a deed may cause one to go to hell. It may give him extreme hope with pride and a big ego that causes him to enter Jahannam wal-'iyadhu billah. Then he said, the second part of his statement, a sin may be the cause for one to go to Jannah. What does he mean by that? A person made a sin. He felt remorse. And that's part of hope. He felt remorse. He repented. The action, he repented. He humbled him to Allah. It got him to return to Allah. He had hope in Allah. But not just any hope. He hoped followed by the action of repentance. He turned to Allah in agony over that sin that he repented from. And he followed it with deed after deed until he met Allah. Not only entering Jannah, but all the way to Firdaus. That's the good kind of hope. That's the praised form of Rajaa. That's the praised form of Rajaa. So the praised hope is hope for a sinner. A sinner who repented and followed that with good deeds. That's a good hope. Hope for reward for one who's doing good as he continues and strives to do his deeds and obedience to Allah. Now the second category or form is the dispraised form of Rajaa. And an example for this is one who transgresses and sins. He leaves obedience and submission to Allah, but then has hope in the forgiveness of Allah. That's not called Rajaa, that's called Tamanni. There's a difference between Tamanni and Rajaa. Like many you see today, they transgress in their sins. They don't even have the thought of repenting, the actual thought of repenting. They have extreme hope with no action. Then they tell you, Inna Allah ghafurur rahim. And they neglect Shadid al-Iqab. Declare, O Muhammad, to my slaves that I am the oft forgiven, the most merciful. Nabbi ibadi anni ana al-ghafurur rahim. That's what they take. But what about the second part of the ayah? Finish the ayah. Tell them, finish the ayah for us. وَأَنَّ عَذَابِي هُوَ الْعَذَابُ الْأَلِيمُ. And my torment is indeed the most painful torment. Two wings of a bird. Khawf and Rajaa. There's a difference between the correct form of Rajaa, which translates into hope. Rajaa is hope. Then you got Tamanni, which will be translated into just wishing. Wishful thinking with no basis or foundation. We want Rajaa, we don't want Tamanni. Al-Hasan al-Basri said, many say it's a hadith, but it's a statement of Hasan al-Basri. There are those who are fooled by the hope they have. They have Tamanni, not Rajaa. There are those who are fooled by the hope that Allah will forgive them. They leave this world without a good deed. And they say, we think good of Allah. Nuhsinu dhanna billah. He said they are liars. If they truly thought good of Allah, they would have acted on it. They would have acted it good. If one of you gets married and he tells his wife for years, day and night, morning and afternoon, I love you, I love you, I love you, but he shows no action. He doesn't treat her good, nor support the family, his family, nor care for them. He doesn't do his duties. He doesn't take care of them or make them happy. But he tells her every day, I love you, I love you. Her answer is, if you love me, show it. Allah said, قُلْ إِن كُنتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهِ If you truly love Allah, فَاتَّبِعُونِ يُحْبِبْكُمُ اللَّهِ Then follow me, Allah will love you and forgive your sins. If you love Allah, follow the teaching of His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's how you show your love to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those who have the dispraised form of raja are like a farmer. He has a land. He didn't plow the land or take care of it or plant it. Yet he has raja and hope at the end of the season that his land will grow fruits like his neighbor who plowed it and planted it and irrigated it and watered it. If you tell that people about that farmer who did nothing, you expect the land to grow fruits, they'll say he's crazy. And another example is like of the dispraised form of raja. It's like a man who has a wife, yet doesn't have a relationship with her, but hopes and has raja for a child. People would mock him. Or another man who has the hope of being an alim, yet never does anything to study ilm. What's the difference between tamanni and raja? Tamanni is the wrong type of hope. It's the hope of forgiveness with no action of the limbs. It's more like an illusion or a fantasy or a deformed way of thinking. Raja, on the other hand, is having hope while doing the deeds as well. Now, the author uses as proof, he chose as proof, there's plenty of proof, but the author chose a specific verse. فَمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو لِقَاءَ رَبِّهِ فَلْيَعْمَلْ عَمَلًا صَالِحًا وَلَا يُشْرِكْ بِعِبَادَةِ رَبِّهِ أَحَدًا. So whoever hopes to see his Lord and be rewarded by Him, فَلْيَعْمَلْ عَمَلًا صَالِحًا, let him make his worship correctly and purely and sincerely for the sake of Allah. وَلَا يُشْرِكْ بِعِبَادَةِ رَبِّهِ أَحَدًا, and let him not make any share of his ibadah for anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو, whoever has hope. If you look at that sentence right there, that's a form of praise. If you were to judge that statement there, is it praise or not praise? It's praise. Whoever has hope, that's indicative of praise. If it's praise, it means what it's talking about is ibadah. Because we said the definition of ibadah, a portion of the definition of ibadah is anything that Allah praises or loves. Yarju, فَمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو. Yarju means has hope in the mercy of Allah, fearing His punishment. Yarju. Yarju liqa'a rabbih. Yarju liqa'a rabbih. Hoping and longing to see his Lord. Yarju liqa'a rabbih. Hoping and longing to see his Lord. Meaning the Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is two types. No khas, it's an honorary special one. And this is for the believers who Allah is pleased with. And they are pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to be among those. So this is the honorary seeing of Allah or meeting of Allah. Then there's a liqa'am. That's for everyone. Ya ayyuhal insanu innaka kadihun ila rabbika kadhan famulaqih. You're returning to your Lord verily with your deeds and your actions, both good and bad deeds. For sure you're returning to Him and you will meet Him. This one in this verse, this is for everyone. Everyone is meeting Allah, this meeting, good and bad. فَمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو لِقَاءَ رَبِّهِ فَلْيَعْمَلْ. فَلْيَعْمَلْ is in order to act. If you have hope, you're praised. But he didn't just say hope, he said فَلْيَعْمَلْ. You gotta do, you gotta act. عَمَلًا صَالِحًا. عَمَلًا صَالِحًا, let him make his worship. Let him, in addition to the worship of hope, he has to act on it. عَمَلًا صَالِحًا means to make it pure for the sake of Allah and sincere for the sake of Allah. Pure for the sake of Allah and sincere for the sake of Allah and in accordance. The two rules for any ibadah you do. The proof for that is وَمَا أُمِرُوا إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ. They were commanded not, but that they should worship Allah sincerely as a condition for their ibadah. They have to be sincere. It has to be pure. That's the first condition. The second condition فَلْيَعْمَلْ عَمَلًا صَالِحًا. The second condition for فَلْيَعْمَلْ عَمَلًا صَالِحًا is it must be in accordance. And the proof for that is with the hadith in Sahih Bukhari and Muslim, مَنْ عَمِلَ عَمَلًا لَيْسَ عَلَيْهِ أَمْرُنَا فَهُوَ رَدٌّ. Whoever introduces into our religion that which is not part of it, it will be rejected. It's an innovation. So those are the two rules. Those are the two rules for عَمَلًا صَالِحًا, for the deed, sincerely and in accordance. Then the tail of the verse, فَمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو لِقَاءَ رَبِّهِ فَلْيَعْمَلْ عَمَلًا صَالِحًا وَلَا يُشْرِكْ بِعِبَادَةِ رَبِّهِ أَحَدًا. Let him not make any share of his worship for anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This includes major and minor shirk in this part of the verse. This is why you don't make shirk, because the one who you worship, who nourished you, who created you, sustained you, is the one you're supposed to worship. And ahada is nakira fi siyaq al-umum, indefinite noun that's in the context of negation, which renders a general meaning. Meaning, absolutely, completely, no one gets a share of your ibadah but Allah. It's to affirm the fact that no one gets a share. Ahada, the verse, ahada, nakira fi siyaq al-umum, the verse would have been complete without the word ahada. But it's added as emphasis in this crucial matter to show that absolutely, surely, no one can get a share of that ibadah. Why did the author use this as proof? He used it as proof to show that raja is ibadah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the verse praised raja, so made it ibadah. That's all. So giving a portion to other than Allah becomes shirk. Note, a believer should have both fear and hope. Khawf and raja. Just like the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught us in the hadith in Tirmidhi and Ibn Majah, on the authority of Anas, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam entered upon a man who was dying. He said, "How do you feel?" He asked him about his status. He said, "I fear my sins and I have hope in Allah." I fear my sins, yet I have hope in Allah. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, there's not a believer who has that combination that you just said in his heart, in a setting like that, except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give him that which he hopes and saves him from that which he fears. The more hope one has, the more that it should entice him to do more actions and worships. The driving force of actions to get you nearer to Allah are three: fear, hope, and love. Khawf, raja, wal hub. The strongest, more powerful of the three is love. They're all mentioned in the verse, أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ يَبْتَغُونَ إِلَىٰ رَبِّهِمُ الْوَسِيلَةَ أَيُّهُمْ أَقْرَبُ وَيَرْجُونَ رَحْمَتَهُ وَيَخَافُونَ عَذَابَهُ إِنَّ عَذَابَ رَبِّكَ كَانَ مَحْذُورًا. They desire means of access to their Lord, to get closer and nearer to Allah. That's love right there. That's love. And they hope for His mercy. That's hope. يَرْجُونَ رَحْمَتَهُ وَيَخَافُونَ عَذَابَهُ. And they fear His torment. So the fear and the torment and the love are in that verse. Love is the head. Fear and hope are like the two wings. That's your spiritual vehicle in your journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to land you in Firdaus. إِنَّ عَذَابَ رَبِّكَ كَانَ مَحْذُورًا. إِنَّ عَذَابَ رَبِّكَ كَانَ مَحْذُورًا. The end of the verse. Verily the torment of your Lord is something to be afraid of. Just like you see a bird maneuvering in the sky with his wings, you do the same with your hope and fear. You never see a bird flopping with one wing or with a wounded wing. If it's an injured wing and it's not cared for, he'll drop on the floor and die. You need to try your best to keep an overall balance of your wings of khawf and raja. At sometimes, one may be slightly more than another. Sometimes it may be slightly more than another, and that may be the pushing force. But an overall, you should keep a balance of the wings of khawf and raja. That's targhib and tarhib. Khawf al-Rajaa is targhib and tarhib. Khawf al-Rajaa is Jannah and Nar. Unlike today, the modernists want to cut the wing of khawf and want to eliminate it. They want targhib, but no tarhib. They want Rajaa part, but not the khawf part. They want the mention of Jannah, 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 but no Jahannam. They want, or they think their intellect is wiser than the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the all-wise, who sent the messengers with both targhib and tarhib, with both khawf and raja. Rusulan mubashirin wa mundirin. Mubashirin wa mundirin. Both of them. Let's go on to the fourth example of ibadah that he chose, which is tawakkul. He chose tawakkul as the fourth example. After dua, khawf, raja, then tawakkul. وَدَلِيلُ التَّوَكُّلِ, the proof he chose for tawakkul is وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَتَوَكَّلُوا إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. And place your reliance and trust on Allah if you are true believers. And he also chose a second proof for tawakkul. He chose two proofs for this tawakkul. The other one he chose is وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. Whoever places his reliance and trust on Allah, then Allah will suffice him. This is the fourth ibadah that he chose. What's tawakkul? Tawakkul has three prongs to it, three pillars. Tawakkul, first of all, is placing reliance upon something. It's to depend upon something. And placing reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to depend upon Allah. That's first. Second, relying on Allah in addition to depending on Him also means to accept Allah as being the one who suffices you in bringing whatever is beneficial to you and protecting you from whatever is harmful. This is part of completing your faith. Then third of all, the third prong, truthful heart reliance on Allah does not contradict using means. So using means is part of tawakkul, it's a prong. That's why sometimes you read in Ibn al-Qayyim, you get confused. Or you think he is contradicting himself. You read Ibn al-Qayyim's work, and you see sometimes, for example, he encourages the means. And elsewhere, he'll probably reject his statements where he'll reject the usage of means. There's no inconsistency with his writing. Using means is good as long as they don't penetrate the heart. The heart must be in pure, total reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The means, you can use the means, but don't let them taint the heart. That will taint your tawakkul. You reject the means heart-wise, but you may use them physical-wise. The means have no effect without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what you gotta believe. The heart is tied purely and totally to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to achieve tawakkul. At-Tustari said a beautiful statement regarding this matter. He said, whoever neglects the means has neglected the sunnah. Whoever neglects the means has neglected the sunnah. And whoever neglects tawakkul has neglected iman. Then he went on to say, using the means is the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And tawakkul is the status of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Whoever is on the status of the Messenger of Allah should not neglect the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah. And the means here could be shar'iyya and qadariyya. There's two types of means. Shar'iyya means like prayer, salah. That means to attain the love and pleasure of Allah. Qadariyya means that are qadariyya is like the usage of medicine, like aspirin for a headache. That is qadariyya means. True tawakkul means one believes that those means don't harm or benefit in themselves. You have to understand that. They're under the will, completely under the will of Allah. Whatever He wills will happen. Whatever He doesn't will not happen. You do the means with the heart fully attached to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now the proof he mentions, وَدَلِيلُ التَّوَكُّلِ قوله تعالى وعلى الله فتوكلوا إن كنتم مؤمنين. And place your reliance and trust in Allah if you are true believers. وعلى الله فتوكلوا إن كنتم مؤمنين. Reliance on Allah means to rely on Allah and that He is sufficient and the best disposer of all affairs, and the one you delegate your matters to. فتوكلوا. Here he says, فَتَوَكَّلُوا إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. فَتَوَكَّلُوا, in order. And we said in the last class that it means wajib. What else? It means wajib. It also means when Allah ordered it, it's a ibadah. When He ordered it, it means He likes it. It means it's a ibadah. The definition of ibadah we took. So that means tawakkul is only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you can't give anyone anything, any portion of it. In kuntum mu'minin. If you're true believers, rely on Him. To complete your iman, you must rely and have tawakkul on Allah. If you're a true believer. Here the verse says, if you are true believers. And in Arabic, it should have been flipped around in a way. It should be إن كنتم مؤمنين فتوكلوا على الله. It's switched around because the Quran comes in the peak of the Arabic eloquency and to teach us deep, detailed matters. تقديم ما حقه التأخير في علم المعاني. Why is it changed like that? Why is it changed? To get a lesson out of it, a linguistic lesson out of it. It's to add emphasis to rely only on Allah. It's called al-hasr wal-qasr. Restrict and limit your reliance on Allah. That's what you get out of it when you change it. Second of all, it tells you linguistically ikhtisas. Switching them around in that sentence is to show tawakkul is special and particular to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a specialty only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This type of reliance is only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Depend on Allah if you are true believers. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah commenting on this verse in Madarij al-Salikin said, he made reliance on Allah a condition of believing, which shows that it's lacking in iman for those who lack reliance on Allah. فَمَنْ لَا تَوَكُّلَ لَهُ لَا إِيمَانَ لَهُ. This verse has the two avenues of proof we talked about either in last class or the one before it. It has the two methods of proof that we talk about, how ibadahs are proven. He ordered in the beginning that one rely on Allah. That made it a ibadah. We have other proof that show that if it's ibadah, you can't give any portion to other than Allah, otherwise it would be shirk. So there's the order, and it made it ibadah. The second avenue is also in this verse. At the end of the verse, where he says, and he denies iman for those who don't have reliance on Allah. That's the both avenues of proof. It's in this verse. We spoke about that when we spoke on khawf, I believe. فَلَا تَخَافُوهُمْ وَخَافُونِي إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. Very similar to that. إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. And similar here for tawakkul. The author mentioned a second proof. وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. Whoever places his reliance and trust in Allah, then Allah will be sufficient for him. Why did he mention two proofs for tawakkul? Why didn't he just mention one? Because this is a great ibadah. It's an emphasized ibadah. So he mentioned two verses as proof. The first verse is the order to rely on Allah. فَتَوَكَّلُوا. Rely on Allah. You must do it. The second verse that he chose from his wisdom pertaining to tawakkul is to show the fruit. Once you do that, what's the fruit of relying on Allah? If you rely on Allah, then He's sufficient for you. So the second verse is to tell you Allah will suffice you if you rely on Him. The second verse is to set the mind of one who trusts in Allah at rest and ease. This verse is a form of praise for one who relies on Allah. That Allah loves it. It's an act that Allah loves it. And it's proof on how it's ibadah, because Allah loves it. And giving ibadah to other than Allah is shirk. In this verse, Allah is telling you, rely on Him, and He will be sufficient, and He is sufficient for you. He will take care of you. That's basically what the verse says. Who better than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would you want to handle your affairs or tell you, I'll take care of your matters? You hear of someone, he'll go to a sheikh or a doctor. He'll complain about a problem with the doctor or lawyer or sheikh or whoever he's complaining, or a friend who's powerless. When he says to him, all right, I got it for you, don't worry, he feels at ease and peace and becomes confident and gets happy because he's now comforted. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the all-powerful, the creator of you and the universe, says, I'm sufficient for you. All you got to do is rely on me. In present day terms, that's like saying, I got you. But who gets the peace and ease from reciting or learning that verse? Now, after the proof, let's go into the forms of tawakkul. The first form of tawakkul, the first is trust and reliance upon Allah. Every Muslim must have this. He must have this to complete his iman, as the verse says. It's a sign of sincerity and it's obligatory. In kuntum mu'minin. You must have that reliance on Allah. The second type is the secret trust and dependence. This is given the type of tawakkul we mentioned in number 1 to other than Allah. This is number 2. Example, he depends on someone dead to bring him some benefit or to remove some harm that only Allah can do. That's major shirk. Why is that major shirk? Because having reliance on someone deceased can only come from someone who believes that that deceased has some hidden control over the universe, over the creation. There's no difference if the deceased is a prophet or he's what they call a wali, a pious person, or if he's an enemy or if he's an angel. It doesn't matter who it is. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered that tawakkul be for him completely. He relied on a dead or inanimate object to be saved from evil or to attain good. That's shirk akbar. In matters only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do. Thinking a deceased has some control over the universe, as the Rafidah, and having tawakkul on him, as the Rafidah believe in their 12 Imams, or some of the Sufis who call it quwwa khafiyya to their supposed pious heads, that's shirk akbar. And it doesn't matter, like we said, if it's a messenger or a wali or a tyrant or enemy of Allah, it doesn't matter who that dead person is. The third form of tawakkul is relying on someone in affairs and then feeling low in those matters, as if another person has a higher standard in those matters. So you rely on him. For example, relying on someone alive to bring you your rizq, or relying on a police officer to save you from evil, or relying on the boss to give you the paycheck on Friday. He's a creation. He has some power that Allah has given him. He has the means. You work and he pays you. But the reliance part of the heart shouldn't be there, the heart part. And it depends on the level of reliance. Sometimes it could be permissible, sometimes it could be minor shirk, and sometimes it could be major shirk. If you're relying on him as means, like any other means, your heart is detached from those means, your heart knows that you're fully relying on Allah, and to only Allah is the one, and that Allah brought you that means, there's nothing wrong with that. That's permissible way of thinking. However, it becomes minor shirk if one is fully relying on the means, like the employer for a paycheck or an officer for safety, and it can be possibly elevated to major shirk depending on the heart level attachment to those means. Like, for example, relying on the doctor's skills for operation. If you believe his means from Allah and your heart is detached from reliance on Him, that's not shirk, that's permissible. That means that's good. If the success and failure of the operation in your heart you depend on, you say it's from the doctor's skills, that's when the minor shirk begins to seep in, and it could be elevated to worse than that, depending on the heart feeling in that particular matter. The strength of an army, for example, is means. It's means. If it's detached from the heart, there's nothing wrong with that. If the strength of the army in your heart is the determining factor for victory and defeat, that's when the shirk begins to seep in there. Why is it considered shirk? And usually this type is usually most of the time minor shirk, when the means are there. Because if you don't watch out, there will become a strong connection that the heart forms with the means. And that strong dependence upon what is relied on will eat away from the heart reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In a nutshell, keep the means in your hand, not in your heart. This is not to discourage from means, but to keep the heart pure on the pure tawheed that we want. And that's essential to the ibadah of tawakkul. Sometimes, for example, the example of the employer. The means are recommended. You're recommended to do. Relying on Allah for a paycheck without the means, that's tawakkul. That's not tawakkul. It's dispraised. And it's not tawakkul. You don't sit at home and you say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to send me my paycheck. You rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you do the means available. But you don't never let the means get to you. You're doing the means because they're part of the sunnah of doing them. Now the fourth form of tawakkul is really more like using a representative. More like what you would do in a power of attorney or appointing someone. And it's in the fiqh books, you'll find the under section called in the wakala. That's like giving a person permission to represent you in some matters. There's nothing wrong with this form, and it's permissible by the Quran and the Sunnah and ijma'. And it's what, for example, one of the best examples is what Yaqub did. It told his sons, Ya bani yadhhabu fatahassasu min Yusufa wa akhi. He appointed his children to go find Yusuf. Nothing wrong with that. The Prophet ﷺ appointed Abu Huraira and many others over the charity in the house of the Muslims to guard it, to collect the zakah, to pass out the zakah. He appointed those of the Sahaba to carry out the hudud. He appointed Urwa ibn al-Ja'd to buy him sacrifice once. When in his farewell pilgrimage, when the Prophet ﷺ slaughtered 63 camels. And then he called Ali radiallahu an to finish off slaughtering the rest. So he appointed Ali. This type is nothing wrong with that at all. This is normal and it's proven by Quran, Sunnah and Ijma'. We have an issue here. Can you say I rely on tawakkaltu ala Allah wa alayk? That's not permissible. I depend on Allah and you. That's minor shirk. Because Allah said, فَلَا تَجْعَلُوا لِلَّهِ أَنْدَادًا. Don't set up rivals to Allah while you know. You don't say, I depend on Allah and you. And it's authentic from the account of Ibn Abbas that he used to consider لَوْلَ اللَّهِ وَفُلَانٍ أَنَّهَا مِنَ الشِّرْكِ. Ibn Abbas considered the statement, had it not been for Allah and so, it's shirk. He considered that statements like that shirk. Had it not been for Allah and so, it's shirk. The Salaf considered, A'udhu billah wa bik. I seek refuge in Allah and you. I seek refuge in Allah and you. That's shirk. And that's similar to our statement here, I depend on Allah and you. That's very similar to that. That should be avoided. That's minor shirk. How about terms like tawakkaltu alayk, or muttakil alayk, or mutawakkil ala Allah thumma alaykum. I rely on you. I depend on you. Or whatever you choose for the translation of the word tawakkul. This is different from the previous scenario in that, first of all, you're not combining them to Allah. You're saying, or you're saying thumma, meaning and then. Some of the ulama allowed it. They said it's like giving authority or appointing someone to do something. That like we took in form number 4 of tawakkul. So they said it's it's permissible. Others said it's not permissible, and that's possibly closer to being the more correct of the opinions, because Allah said, وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَتَوَكَّلُوا. And put your tawakkul on Allah. So we should keep it pure. We should do our best to keep it pure and refrain from using those. And there's a hadith in Musnad Ahmad, إِنَّكَ إِن تَكَلْنِي إِلَى نَفْسِي تَكَلْنِي إِلَى خَطِيئَةٍ وَعَوْرَةٍ وَذَنْبٍ. The Prophet ﷺ said in a dua, if you leave me to rely on myself, I will be in error, shame and sin. So if he said that about himself, why would we use that term about anyone else? Hadith Abi Bakr, قال رسول صلى الله عليه وسلم في دعوات المكروب اللهم رحمتك أرجو فلا تكلني إلى نفسي طرفة عين وأصلح لي شأني كله لا إله إلا أنت. The hadith, the dua of the distressed that's in Sunan Abi Dawood and Ibn Hibban. Yes, Abi Dawood and Ibn Hibban. The dua, the Prophet ﷺ said, Oh Allah, I seek your mercy. Don't let me rely on myself, not even for a glimpse. So if the Prophet refused to say that, tawakkul about himself, we shouldn't say it about anyone else. I believe tawakkul, in whatever term we use in English translation of it, it's not proper to attribute it to any creation, and you should only use them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we teach that to ourselves and our kids, we will raise our tongues and our hearts and our children on the pure tawheed that we want. You can, however, say statements like, I rely on Allah and I appoint you or I delegate you. Different statements that are different from tawakkul. Some use the hadith of Sahal ibn Sa'd al-Sa'idi to say it's permissible to use tawakkul in other contexts other than Allah. من توكل لي ما بين رجلي وما بين لحيي توكلت له بالجنة. The hadith is in Sahih Bukhari. The hadith uses the word tawakkul of guarded. Instead of garden, he used tawakkul what's between his lips and what's between his legs. And then he will get Jannah if he protects and guards that. But the word term used is tawakkul. In Arabic, the Prophet ﷺ used tawakkul as guard. But it's not used in the context of reliance or anywhere close to that. Tawakkul in this hadith comes to mean guarded or protected. It doesn't come to mean anywhere or anything about reliance. And nothing to do with our topic. So it's not proof for using tawakkul for creation. That's the more proper way of using the terms, is leaving matters of tawakkul, the terms of tawakkul, only to Allah. What about saying or having confidence in oneself? If you say I have confidence in myself or believe it, does that relate to tawakkul? To have confidence in yourself, as in tawakkul, it's not permissible, because it's just because it's yourself. That's reliance on means. And it's no different than having tawakkul on others. So that's minor shirk. But if you mean by confidence in yourself that you're good at something, you don't mean tawakkul, you mean I'm good at something, I tried it before, I've done it over and over and it's easy for me and I learned it very well. In that context, there's nothing wrong with having confidence or saying I have confidence in myself. Now another issue, what about referring to someone as being reliable? You say he's reliable in that matter. If you mean he's trustworthy and he's honest, he does his work properly, that's permissible. If you mean you rely on him and the result is 100% always, then that is when minor shirk seeps into it. Now tawakkul is a vast topic and a topic desperately needed in this ummah, especially in this day and age. This day and age, why? Because it's more of a materialistic world, especially those who live in the West. You hear ulama, for example, who say, oh, they're too powerful. The enemy's too powerful. If those same ulama were around the Prophet ﷺ in their lack of tawakkul that they have today, they would have argued with the Prophet ﷺ in the day of Badr and told him, go back. What did the Prophet ﷺ do? He put all the means he had, no matter how simple they were. He used all the means. We don't look at the means. We use anything of means that we have. And then he went forth with the reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to a stunning victory. In personal matters, our brothers and sisters agonize over their personal problems, whereas if they perfect and establish this ibadah of tawakkul, they would be free of distress and worries. Wallahi, all my life, and we went through a lot of times, we've had some difficult times. Alhamdulillah for everything. I never seen my father carry a worry ever. Allahumma barik lahu. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant him a long life full of deeds and then reward him with firdaus. One may cry over a hardship. We're not better than the Prophet ﷺ who cried over the death of his son. But tawakkul paves a worry-free life. If we raise our ummah on the true belief of tawakkul, your problems will vanish. You live a content life. Even if the universe is against you. A generation raised on tawakkul, the words the Prophet ﷺ taught young little Ibn Abbas, when he taught Ibn Abbas, and note that he chose a young boy to teach him the statements of tawakkul. The golden words of tawakkul, he chose to teach them to a young boy. He was trying to tell us, your kids before your elders need to master this. If the universe comes to benefit you, they wouldn't be able to do so unless Allah wrote it. And if the universe came to harm you, they will not be able to harm you except that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wrote that will happen to you. Such a peaceful, content life. If you let that sink and register in your heart. Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, he died in 795 years after the Hijrah. In his book Tabaqat al-Hanabila, he wrote a story. And it's also mentioned in Mu'jam Yusuf ibn Khalil al-Hafiz, and it's also mentioned in Tarikh ibn al-Najjar. So Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali mentions the story about Al-Qadi Abu Bakr Muhammad ibn Abdul Baqi ibn Muhammad al-Bazzaz al-Ansari. His nickname was Qadi al-Maristan. This man lived 535 years after he died 535 years after the Hijrah. And he narrates a story about himself that Ibn Rajab mentioned. And it shows you reliance on Allah. And it shows you that reliance on Allah does not mean you will not go through dark tunnels in your life. Reliance on Allah means you put your trust in Allah. And you accept what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to offer you because He chose what's best for you. That's part of reliance on Allah. That's the Hakim. If you truly believe what we say every day, that Allah is Al-Hakim, or the All-Wise, that means He chose the wise decision for you. Who better or more wise than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? You see those who sign off a power of attorney to someone else. It could be a spouse, it could be a child, it could be a relative, it could be a friend, a durable power of attorney that you all know. And it means when you sign a durable power of attorney, you give that person you appointed the right to sell, to buy, to take the money out of withdraw the money out of your accounts and do whatever he wishes with them. If one is incapacitated, the person you appointed can make decisions for you. He can make the decision as far as pulling the plug of a life support machine. You gave that power of attorney because you fully trusted them. Once you gave that power of attorney, you don't question the decisions of the person. Otherwise, you should not have given it to him or withdraw it. But once you gave it to him, you wholeheartedly knew that person would do the best for me. وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلُ الْأَعْلَى. And Allah has the supreme examples. Tawakkul is putting your full trust on Allah, who has the supreme examples, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You may go through dark tunnels in your life. That's part of life and a part of a believer's life. You think they're dark, but Allah always chooses what's best for you. عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ إِنَّ أَمْرَهُ كُلَّهُ لَهُ خَيْرٌ. It's astonishing the matter of a believer. Everything that happens to him is good. You may not know it. You may not see the wisdom of it in this life. You may later on see it. If you don't see it in this life, you will see it in the life after. Ibn Rajab mentioned the story of Qadi al-Maristan. He said about himself, Qadi al-Maristan, he said, I was hungry one day in Mecca. And I became hungry one day that I couldn't find anything to eat. So I went walking around in Mecca. I found a pouch, a tightly tied pouch. I picked it up and brought it to my house. And then in my house, when I untied it, I found a beautiful necklace of pearls that it's like I've never seen anything like it before. He went from a difficult time to the utmost of ease. But tawakkul didn't waver a tiny bit in his heart. Full tawakkul on Allah when he was walking around hungry. And the same tawakkul now that he's a millionaire. It didn't last for long. The circumstance changed, but tawakkul remains firm. Unwavering tawakkul. As soon as he walked in Mecca, right after that, he walked in Mecca, he heard the old man calling out, I lost a necklace and I have 500 dinar reward for whoever brings me back the necklace. He said, I called the old man. That was bad news for him. He thought he was a millionaire. He said, I called the old man. Come to my house. I think I have your pouch. So he told the old man, describe the necklace for me. He said the old man not only described the necklace, but he described the pouch and the string that was tied around the pouch and the number of pearls and the string that held the pearls together and every single detail about the necklace. So he said, I gave him the necklace. It had to have been him. No way could have knew that all those details. And he handed me 500 dinar. And just as I was about to take it, I thought to myself, he said, I don't deserve this. And I refused the reward. The man kept insisting on giving the reward. And it was as if Abu Bakr wanted to keep his reliance on Allah totally, refusing the reward for something he felt he really didn't deserve. He didn't do nothing to deserve that money. So the old man took the reward and left. Qadi al-Maristan, whose name is Abu Bakr, Kunya Abu Bakr, said, I left Mecca after that. And I took the ocean. And on the way, the ship began to sink. All the money on board sunk, and many of the passengers, most of them, died. He said, I seen a small raft while I was in the water. I held on to it, and the wind kept blowing me for such a long time until I got to an occupied island. When I landed on the island, he said, I immediately headed to the masjid, finding that there's no one there, so I began to recite Quran. The people attended the masjid. They came to me, stranger in town. They asked, could you teach us Quran? They seen him recite it. Could you teach us Quran? He said, yes. And then they began to overwhelm him with gifts. Then he said, I seen pages in the masjid one day, so I began to read in them, pages of the Quran. They said, you even know how to read and write? He said, yes. They told him, will you teach us and our children how to read and write? And they began to learn from him how to read and write, and also they showered him with gifts. Then they told him one day, after being there for some time, we have this problem. We have this young orphan girl. She has recently been orphaned. Her father died, and we want you to marry her. This was a tactic they did to try to keep him in town and attached to the town so he will not think of ever leaving them. He resisted. He wasn't even thinking about marriage. But based on their insistence, he said, I agree to marry her. He married her. Okay, the night of the wedding, when they presented her to him, he said, I looked at her and I was startled and astonished, and I was unable to raise my eyes off her neck. I seen the necklace I gave the old man some time ago on her neck. This is a true story, authentic story. He wasn't looking at his new bride's face, even though she's mentioned as being one of the most beautiful women in that town, in that island. The relatives around him said, you broke that orphan's heart. How could you look at the necklace and not at her? You're breaking her heart. It's like you're saying she's ugly by your looks. He said, I began to tell them the story of how I found that necklace on her neck and how I returned it to some old man in Mecca, and how I left Mecca, and then the ship sunk, and how I arrived to their island. I told them the whole details of the story. They began to shout and cry, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar. And the crowds in the town began to gather. He said, why are you people doing this, and why are you astonished? They told him, the man you gave the necklace to is the father of this girl. And what's more astonishing than that is we used to always hear him say, I never met a Muslim on the face of this earth like the man who returned the necklace to me. And they said we used to always hear him make dua, oh Allah, unite that man who returned the necklace with my daughter as her husband. He used to always ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he be the husband to his daughter. And Allah answered his dua. This is what happens with tawakkul. During hard times, your tawakkul needs to go unwavering. And that light will reappear at the end of the tunnel. Tawakkul is your source of ease and happiness in both difficult and happy times. That's not the end of the story. Look it, from tunnel to tunnel. You see the light, there you go in another tunnel. He said, I lived with her a very nice life. And Allah blessed me with 2 children. Tawakkul, through ease and hardship. Then she died. His wife died. Another hardship. So he said, me and my sons inherited the necklace. Then my 2 children died. Another hardship, but no, the tawakkul's still there. He said, then I sold the necklace for 100,000 dinar. And that's where I got the wealth. He was explaining later on how he got the wealth he has. وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. Whoever fears Allah and keeps his duty to Allah, Allah will always find him a way out from every single difficulty you can imagine. وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبْ. He will provide him from sources he never imagined. وَيَرْزُقْهُمْ, it will come from sources you never even perceive. وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. Whoever puts his trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he will be sufficient for him. Whoever puts his trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he will suffice him. If you see the verses ordering tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you see somewhere there a quality that only Allah has. وَلِلَّهِ غَيْبُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَإِلَيْهِ يُرْجَعُ الْأَمْرُ كُلُّهُ. To Allah belongs the ghaib, the unseen. Who else? The unseen of the heavens and the earth. Who else but Allah has that quality? Who knows the ghaib but Allah? Who else has that quality? Okay, وَلِلَّهِ غَيْبُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَإِلَيْهِ يُرْجَعُ الْأَمْرُ كُلُّهُ. To him return all affairs for decision. Who else other than Allah runs the universe? Can anyone bypass his rules? What happens? So worship him, O Muhammad, and put your tawakkul on him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The result. When we used to go through difficult times, and my father would see it, I was distressed, he would say in a question-like format, وَلِلَّهِ غَيْبُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَإِلَيْهِ يُرْجَعُ الْأَمْرُ نِصْفُ. To Allah belongs the heaven and the earth, and half the matter goes back to Allah, in a question-like format. And I would look at him and say, he's the one who taught me the Quran. He memorized it 40 years before he taught me, so he knew the Quran. I say, وَإِلَيْهِ يَرْجَعُ الْأَمْرُ كُلُّهُ. To Allah belongs all the affairs, not 1/3 or 1/2 like you said. In Arabic, there was no need for kullah, the word kullah. It's fine without kullah, all of it. But Allah put kullah to add emphasis that all matters and all affairs belong to Allah. To assure you that all matters belong to Allah. So when I repeat the verse back to my father and I say kullah, my father would say, then why are you distressed over a matter that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose and has full control and runs the entire affair of it? That would make me feel better than if someone who's in a desert for days and hasn't drank, and then you bring him a cold drink of water. Look at the verse. Look at the verse. To him belongs the knowledge of the unseen. To him belongs the knowledge of the unseen. وَلِلَّهِ غَيْبُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَإِلَيْهِ يُرْجَعُ الْأَمْرُ كُلُّهُ. And all matters belong to him. Those are qualities of only to Allah. So what about that, Ya Allah? فَاعْبُدْهُ, worship Him, وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَيْهِ, and depend on Him. The one who has the knowledge of ghaib, only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The one who nobody can overrule his decision, turn to Him in worship and depend on Him. Another verse, وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى الْحَيِّ الَّذِي لَا يَمُوتُ, depend on Him. What quality we have here? The one who's alive and never dies. Who's the one who's alive and never dies? Allah. If you find anyone who's alive and rely on Him, it's only Allah. رَبُّ الْمَشْرِقِ وَالْمَغْرِبِ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُوَ فَاتَّخِذْهُ وَكِيلًا. He alone, Allah, the Lord in the east and the west. Who's the only Lord of the east and the west? Allah. So worship Him. So take Him alone as your wakil, as the disposer of your affair. لا إله إلا هو. Al-Humaydi in his book جذوة المقتبس, there's a book Al-Humaydi wrote. In the book جذوة المقتبس, he wrote of the history of some of the leaders in Umara of Spain, of our Spain. And he wrote about a story about one of the leaders, and it included Ibn Hazm, the great Imam Ibn Hazm's father, who was from Spain. You know, Ibn Hazm was from Andalus. The leader, his name is Al-Mansur. Al-Mansur had a day when people would come into him and convey their problems, write letters of request, speak to him about matters. One day a woman came in pleading that her son be released from prison. Al-Mansur had imprisoned her son. She came begging and pleading that Al-Mansur release her son. When the captive's mother cried and began to beg Al-Mansur, he got even more arrogant. He said, "Oh, you reminded me, your son is still a captive? Oh, we're going to execute him." So he took out a paper to write his order, as he always does. They go by the order of the paper. And he said, "Yuslab." He said, "Yuslab," meaning crucify him. When he wrote it on the paper, he said, "Yutlaq," which means release him. Then he handed the paper over to the minister, which is Ibn Hazm's father. His minister was Ibn Hazm's father, to carry out the crucifixion. Sometime later, maybe the next day, he asked his minister or deputy, Ibn Hazm's father, "Did you carry out the crucifixion?" He said, "Oh, Amir, look at the order. You said release him. We're preparing him for release." Al-Mansur, the leader, got angry. He said, "Crucify him." He said, "Crucify him." But as he's writing it, he said, "Yutlaq," release him. He's saying crucify him. His hand is writing, release him. And he gives it to Ibn Hazm's father. Again, he asked Ibn Hazm's father, "Did you people crucify that person, that prisoner?" He said, "Amir, you said release him. The paper says release him." A third time, he wrote, "Release him," while his mouth was saying, "Crucify him." Same scenario 3 times. When Al-Mansur asked for the third time, he showed him the paper in his handwriting. It says release. He's being prepared for release. When they showed him the decree that he wrote, it finally sunk in his head, in Al-Mansur's head, and he says, "يُطْلَقْ رَغْمَ أَنْفِ مَنْ أَرَادَ اللَّهُ إِطْلَاقَهُ لَا أَقْدِرُ عَلَى مَنْعِهِ." Let him go. Let him go. I have no control over this. Whoever Allah wants released, I could never keep him a captive. Who made a leader with all his power and might and his intention say something his own hands couldn't even write it? He said something while his own hands wrote something different. It is Allah whom you should be relying on, who caused his hand to write something different than what his mind wanted him to write. وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَحُولُ بَيْنَ الْمَرْءِ وَقَلْبِهِ. Allah is the only one who comes in between a man and a person and his heart. You have a marital issue, turn to Allah, because He controls your spouse's mind more than your spouse controls his mind or her mind themselves. When it's a work problem, put your reliance on Allah and turn to Allah, because Allah has more control over your employer's mind than he does himself. ما من دابة إلا هو آخذ بناصيتها. Not a moving, living creation except Allah grasps its forelocks. آخذ بناصيتها. You know what that means? Bedouins back in the days, they used to have camels. Camels are hard to restrain. But if you put a holster on the camel around his head, the head is about this big. You got full control over him. You move him left, right, forward, backward with that little restraint. And that's how Allah has control of every creation. You know John Grisham, the one who wrote many law-based novels. He wrote his first and I think his only non-fiction book, and it's only one I read of his books. It's a very good book, and it's lack of justice. It's about the lack of justice in the criminal system. It's called The Innocent Man. And it's a book that speaks about the lack of justice in the US system, and also about the torture of the electric chair. Very interesting book. But what caught my attention in that book when I read it, more than anything, was a story he mentioned years and years ago, of a man who was sent to be electrocuted. And he describes the man, black, slim, short, slightly over 100 pounds, very slim, very small. They put him in the electric chair. They strapped him down. And when they left the room to turn on the switch, just as they were about to close the door, when they closed the door, the young man, he's a man, but he's very small in his build. He breaks out of the straps and begins to run around hysterically in the electric room where they're about to electrocute him until they bring the good squad that restrain him and take him back to his cell. No, he's a very slim and small guy, and he said he breaks out of the straps. Straps that the strongest of criminals never broke out of them. He didn't say he slipped out of them, which you can possibly understand, but he mentions his small size, and then he breaks out of them. The goon squad run in the room, restrain him, and take him to a cell, and they set another execution date. The next execution day, the same thing happens. He breaks out of the straps a second time. Then a third, and a fourth, and a fifth, and a sixth, and a seventh time. On the seventh time, things happen differently. Every execution they set, as soon as they put him in the chair, he breaks out of the straps. And I said to myself, this is the great lesson in Tawakkul. If the Ummah, what did the Prophet ﷺ tell the Ibn Abbas? If the Ummah came to harm you, and what Allah didn't want them to harm you, they couldn't. That's what happened the first 6 times. And the 7th time, it was written by Allah that His time has come. And if the entire universe on that 7th time came to spare his life, they wouldn't be able to spare his life. Isn't Allah worthy? The one who could do all that and more. Isn't Allah, the one who controls the universe, worthy of you putting your full tawakkul on Him in personal matters, in financial matters, in matters of this ummah? When they asked Al-Ahnaf ibn al-Qais, how did you master taqwa? He said, I know my provision, no one but me takes it, so my heart felt at ease. No stress over materialistic matters or your job or your paycheck. You put your tawakkul on Allah and you do your means. No one's going to take it. He said, I realized my deeds, no one can perform them but me, so I occupied myself and my time with my deeds. Then he said, I realized that Allah is always watchful over me, so I was ashamed to let Him see me committing a sin. Then he said, I realized that death is awaiting for me, so I gathered the provision for that journey. A man told him, so where do you eat from, Al-Ahnaf? And then he mentioned to him the verse, وَلِلَّهِ خَزَائِنُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Do you think Allah will provide a kafir sustenance and leave me out of it? Tawheed was meant to bring you ease and peace in this world and the ultimate goal in Jannah. This is Tawheed. Tawheed is to benefit you in both worlds, to bring you tranquility in life, to make you a firm, true muwahhid who relies with honor. That's the honorable life. Who relies on Allah. A mountain full of problems rests on a believer's shoulder who has true tawakkul. Death in families possibly. Lifelong in prison. Maybe execution. Maybe loss of wealth. With reliance, he takes it with a smile. Nas'alullah lana wa lakum al-afiyah. With reliance, he takes it with a smile. And it's as if you see him, he's possibly like he's the happiest man. Then you see one who likes tawakkul, and he gets a glimpse of that problem, maybe a flat tire, maybe the boss looks at him wrong, and he's got to go visit the psychiatrist and decide what therapy and what medicine he needs to go on. We took, alhamdulillah, dua, fear, hope, dua, fear, hope, and tawakkul. And we'll take, inshallah, al-raghba wal-rahba wal-khushu' next week, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa